All right, so let's begin. I will now request our speakers to join me on stage, starting with Mr. Akshay, Chief Information Technology Officer, HDFC Asset Management Company. We can have a round of applause, please. Mr. Ian Desouza, Group Chief Financial Officer, National Stock Exchange of India. Mr. Deepak Shenoy, CEO, Capital Mine AMC. And to moderate this, I request Dr. Shantanu Paul, Founder, Talent Sprint, to please step forward. A huge round of applause to our panelists. Ladies and gentlemen, once again, a humble request to the one sitting back. Let's make it more interactive session. Day 3, let's make most of GFF 2025. Please move forward and be seated on the front rows. Thank you. Over to you, sir.
Yeah. All right. How's everyone doing? I think we are standing between the audience and the big session coming up in the afternoon. So welcome to all of you. My name is Shantanu Paul, as mentioned. Delighted to have here my colleagues for the panel today. They have all been introduced by the MC. So maybe what we can do, guys, is that we can start off by having a fairly lively conversation, because I figured that we might as well enjoy this panel for the next 35 minutes. And in the process, hopefully all of you get a good glimpse of what's happening in AI, in securities, and capital markets. So maybe, Ian, I thought we'll start with you. As the Group Chief Financial Officer of NSE, you have obviously been looking at a lot of IPO activity in the country, and I'm sure a lot of companies that have been relocating back to India for doing IPO. So IPO volumes have been going up. So curious to know, how is AI making a difference to the space of how you as NSE look at IPOs coming up? So maybe we'll start with that, and then we can keep interacting.
So one of the key documents that is filed with the exchanges is the draft red herring prospectus, and that's a very voluminous document. Now, given the volume, as you alluded to, of IPOs that are happening on the exchanges, there is a very diverse set of companies that are filing their prospectus from various industries. Each industry has their unique characteristics. So I think one of the chapters in the IPO document is the risk factors. So it is very important to understand that the risk factors are comprehensive for that industry, that no risk applicable to a particular industry has been left out. Secondly, there is also a need to maintain consistency. For example, if the risk factors call out a particular item, it shouldn't be contradicting itself in another part of the document. So I think this is one area where AI has been helping. However, I'd like to qualify that by saying the exchanges are MIs and they are first-line regulators. So you cannot totally abdicate that responsibility to AI. AI is a tool. That's like a tool to assist dealing with volumes of data. The final arbiter is the human being and human intelligence. We have not reached that stage of technology where we can, say the AI is doing the job. It's far from that.
That's a good example. In fact, the analogy I always like to use when you make that point about AI is not in charge, but the AI is assisting the person in charge, is, I was once sitting on a flight, on a Boeing 777, and turned out on a long flight to the US, and it turned out the guy next to me was actually a 777 commander going on vacation. So I asked him, so what is the story of what's happening in the cockpit? And he said, he was a pilot for Emirates, right? And he said that the Emirates, all the Middle Eastern airlines incentivize pilots to use 98% automation and 2% manual. But just because using 98% automation doesn't mean you're not in charge of the flight. You're still accountable for the flight. It's just that 98% automation gives you the best fuel efficiency. So I asked him, is that true for all airlines? He said, no, in American Airlines, all the American airlines, 90% automation is acceptable, but not more than that. So they had different incentives. In fact, this pilot told me that if you flew too much manually, more than 2%, you would get a disincentive. You would lose your bonus. So think of, that's a perfect example of machine assisting humans, but not getting delegated to machines completely, right? So great example. I'm sure we'll dig a little more into that, Ian. Thanks for that, I think, red herring prospectus story. So Akshay here is running, I think, one of India's top 3 AMCs. Is that fair to say?
That is correct.
More than what? Close to 100 funds, maybe? Mutual funds?
105.
105, okay, so I was a little behind. So more than 100 funds, so that's a very large AMC and HDFC asset management. Curious to know, I'm sure as you grow responsibly, you want to have responsible, profitable growth. That's the nature of large organizations. What are you doing in terms of is AI playing a role in helping you grow the business, perhaps even responsibly, but more importantly, is AI a tool by which you see the business growing faster? Not talking about regulation, not talking about compliance, just talking about, is AI an engine or a fuel for growth itself?
Yeah, absolutely. So good morning, everyone. It's an honor and a privilege to be a part of this panel and have a conversation on such a vibrant topic that touches everyone. So back in December 2022, when this Gen AI wave started, it started in a way that shook everybody. When we took a look at the possible use cases in our organization within an asset management world, we found that every process was ready for disruption. Every process in every department would be a candidate. And then we felt very strongly there should be a framework approach. We should simplify the decision-making process in terms of which processes would become candidate for AI. And then we started dividing this into 3 broad buckets. The first is, of course, the productivity. Can we improve the span of control? Now, this again, as an overarching objective, can apply universally to any department. We took a look at the marketing department, which was entrusted with creating a lot of collaterals. Gen AI can be used to prepare a lot of content. Of course, you need to keep human in the loop because we are in the business of trust. You do not want any untoward incident or incorrect message going back to the investor and the distributor community. But nevertheless, the potential for productivity improvement in that area was huge. Next is the sales. We, as asset management company, are typically capital light. We have less than 1,600 employees, and we are managing close to 8.5 lakh crores of asset under management. And bulk of this relationship management with the distributor ecosystem is done by the relationship managers. Typically, the span of control of relationship manager managing relationships with the distributors ranges from 1:50 to 1:250. Interestingly, in India, we have 5.5 crore investors on the base of more than 1.4 billion population. So you can see the potential is absolutely huge. Interestingly, we have only 1.7 lakh distributors in the entire ecosystem distributing the mutual fund products. Now, productivity can take you so much. So we said, okay, fine, let's do whatever best we can to empower our colleagues in the sales, our colleagues who are managing the relationships, and see what can we do in terms of driving their productivity. So when they meet their counterparts, when they meet their partners, they typically had to spend a couple of hours preparing their meeting notes, what to discuss, which subjects to cover, what exactly are the market dynamics, what could be the investor sentiments, what could be the potential objections coming in. Now, this entire preparation used to take hours. Gen AI squeezed that entire time. Of course, there is a phase of curation that we have to go through to ensure that we put all the guardrails in place. We do not want to make any forward-looking statements. We do not want to talk about competition. We want to talk about the performance of our products. We want to make sure that there is a time sensitivity to every message that we give. So that guardrail also has to be baked inside. And it has to be aligned to the performance, the passion, the engagement tenets of that partner. So that was the other typical use cases for the sales side. From the service perspective, we have around 280 branches, and each branch is servicing more than 500 distributors and the investors. Now, how do we ensure that each of the colleagues in the branch is empowered with the knowledge of the standard operating procedures? And we are a regulated entity, so we want to make sure that every service we provide follows the predetermined checks and balances. Gone are the days when a colleague who was joining the service operations anew had to go through massive training programs. Now we have empowered them with the bot, where they can ask a question and get an immediate answer. And by the way, the same facility or same empowerment was provided to our colleagues in sales as well. Gone are the days when they had to pull out 5 or 6 reports to understand their performance, to understand what are the areas of improvement. Now, with a simple prompt, they get a feedback. So that's how GenAI has helped. Productivity was the first bucket. The second bucket is about the controls. Given that we are a regulated entity, for every maker, we need to have a checker in-house and ensure that the interests of the investors are always protected, and we do not engage in any practice that would otherwise hamper the growth of the industry. Because at the end of the day, we are HDFC, we stand for trust, and we are the bellwether. And we want to make sure that every engagement, every interaction that we have is compliant, is following the charter of the processes. So this is where, for every maker, you need to have a checker. So if marketing department has produced a number of collaterals, the compliance team also needs to ramp up. They also need to improve their span of control and ensure that all the tenets, all the checks and balances are taken care of. So that's the second bucket about controls, and they need to ramp up their capability, their capacity in tandem with the operations. Where we found AI having significant potential is in the area of scale. Sometime back, I just shared the figure that in a population of 140 crore plus, we have only 5.5 crore investors. We have only 1.7 lakh distributors. And we have close to 1,600 relationship managers. How do we scale this business? Following the framework of automation, augmentation, and eventually autonomous. So right now we are not autonomous. We are still following the augmentation paradigm. This scale, this vision of Vikasit Bharat, this vision of realizing the vision of 2047 requires us to embrace AI wholeheartedly. Yes, there's a number of lessons that we are learning, and we will continue to learn, we'll continue to apply, but that's the opportunity that we all are geared up towards.
That's a very nice overview, quite a lot of insights. Just a clarification I have, question. You said per branch, 500 distributors, is that what you said? And then
on an average,
on
yes.
average, yeah. And per distributor, how many investors on average? Is there a ratio there?
That also ranges depending upon the geography that you are looking at, but we have roughly around 1 lakh distribution partners empaneled, and we have active investor base of in excess of 1 million. So that ratio itself will be running in terms of 1:400 or so.
Okay. Now I was curious because one of the things that I was thinking of a use case, which somebody told me, is that when a distributor is going to meet an investor before the meeting, can you predict the top 5 questions that are relevant to this investor as you walk into the meeting? Because if you can, then obviously you have a much higher quality conversation.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
But I think these are the distributors, right? So, you have different categories of distributors. The mutual fund distributors are pure play distributors. Then you have the registered investment advisors, and they are paid for by the investors. So they work in the interest of the investors directly. The mutual fund distributors are the agency of the asset management company in a way.
So there was a mutual fund which recently launched an NFO, which they claimed is powered by AI. What are your views on that?
See, as far as the NFO is concerned, we clearly have the scheme information document. We clearly have the disclosures. We also suggest who the fund matches are.
I think they were alluding that investments of the funds raised would be powered by AI. So how do you think that, is that an emerging trend in your industry?
Yes, so there are 2 parts. So one is because we have a basket of products, it's very difficult for any one individual to remember the performance characteristics, the fund manager profile for each and every product. How can we make sure that these features and benefits, these figures of the performance are disclosed without any error, without any human error? That is where this type of bots come into play. The NFO bot that we have created is more for the distribution partners to empower them with the same mindset, that they have a very transparent and objective view and a factual view of what exactly is the objective of this particular scheme and what is the risk associated with this particular scheme, what are the parameters that govern this particular scheme, and the fund managers who are going to drive that scheme.
In the interest of time, I'll keep rotating the strike. I know that Deepak has been waiting patiently because he's sitting there as the young and emerging, AMC, looking at, a very large AMC on the other side. And thank you, Ian, for sitting between them like a barrier. So, so Deepak, question for you is, obviously, you have the advantage of being born and in a time when you can be an AI native company, right, from day one, and you don't have the legacy baggage that a very large AMC might have. And with apologies to large AMCs, I mean, baggage is big. We know that in those larger institutions. So my question is that obviously you can't emulate the practices of the large players on day one if you want to compete with them. You can't win by playing their game. So take an example of an area like market research, which we haven't talked about so far. In terms of research capabilities, in terms of analyzing the data in the market and creating a competitive advantage for your mutual fund. I believe you have one fund right now? Yeah. So clearly, that's an area where you can focus in terms of growth must be a big aspiration. What is AI doing for you in terms of superior market research?
Oh, interesting. Firstly, Santanu, thanks for calling me young. I'm always 50. Yes. 50 is the new 30, that's what I say. But so is research, it's an interesting world now because compared to maybe 10 or 15 years ago, the amount of data that we are being inundated with today is probably an order of magnitude, a few orders of magnitude more. So just to be able to understand the scale of this data that is coming at us and therefore analyze interesting companies in the space, developments in each of these companies, the ability to track management commentary. Just earlier it used to be management used to give a press release. Now they have conference calls, they have YouTube interviews, they come on these TV channels at different odd times. Nobody has time to track everything, and therefore you need something to automate all of this and bring it to you in some kind of a meaningful format that said, बहुत सारा कुछ बोला, but actually ये बोला. That is the, that's the essence of it. And this essence is useful from a research perspective if you're just looking at companies subjectively. We are an objective fund house also, in the sense we use quite a lot of quantitative strategies. So with the increase of data, we find it interesting to be able to explore other alternative sources of I mean, in the US and all, they have done things like analyze with satellite information how many cars are there in parking lots of malls and so on. In India, you have other perhaps sources of such information. Now, because they're fuzzy, when I say fuzzy, I mean it's not like an exact quantitative measure that comes from everywhere. You may be getting images. One interesting example is, if you look at IPL, there are now tools that can analyze a feed and tell you things like how many ads of which companies appeared how many times in the feed. And it gets more complicated because your feed is not the same as my feed. Everybody gets different feeds now because if you're going through a Geo something, you get something else in Bangalore and something else in Delhi. If you're coming through another provider, you get a different set of ads and so on. So just imagine doing this manually is, I mean, impossible. And AI is useful because the fuzziness of this has to be analyzed through some kind of an AI metric, right? So research is taking on a different hue. Whenever you want quantitative data, now you have 10 times more quantitative data. It's fun because you never even imagined all the, like cars in parking lots was fun. But ads in IPL, number of people who wear the caps that you provided on, as a just to see the, to measure the effectiveness of your, ad is interesting. Apart from that, layers downstream are, today you're getting a lot more information apart from companies as well. You have to get your information across to customers. And customers are partly distributors, like, I think Abhay is much larger in terms of sets of distributors. We have everything that is said with just a few significant digits less. Yes. So they have 1 lakh distributors, we have 100. So we have somewhere to get along. But we've realized that the market of the number of investors looking at what we do is perhaps the same, in the sense that if I make a video today, and if I make that video 5 minutes long on something interesting as a topic, the ability for it to spread across a much larger ecosystem through a WhatsApp, through YouTube, through Twitter, is much, much higher compared to how much money I would have had to pay using traditional media earlier, right? So we use a lot of these, maybe AI is probably the wrong word for it, but AI is a useful tool in helping us build what is very interesting for people. But to use the digital media to get to people, to analyze the impact of it, where we can add more levers and get to people directly. So beyond the distributor network, even go direct to customers is also something that we're exploring as a fund house. Interestingly, last quarter, the data shows us, or the last few quarters, effective net investments from directly people investing into mutual funds has become equal or greater than the amount coming through distributors into mutual funds as a whole. So there is a change that's happening underneath us, and I think if people are directly accessing our funds, then it's also true that they must directly access us as fund houses. So when I say something, it shouldn't go through multiple layers of filters. And even my distributor tells me, कुछ भेजना WhatsApp में भेजूंगा अपने customers को. It's not no longer the distributor saying, you tell me, I will tell my customers. He's like, you put your voice in a video, I'll send your video, and then the customer will. So this is the new age, and I think that's what AI is helping us with.
Yeah, you covered Gen AI, you covered analytics. Perfect. We kind of have 8 minutes or so left, so I want to move into the, this is a SEBI-sponsored panel, so we can't not talk about SupTech and RegTech. So I'm going to talk to, maybe go back to Ian on this. As a frontline regulator, NSE, you have regulatory powers that are delegated to you to monitor behavior of brokers, listed companies, and so forth. Surveillance must be a very interesting area of choice for a regulator such as yourself, looking at the behavior of market participants. Could you share with the audience any interesting stories, or perhaps at least in terms of case studies of what kind of surveillance is being done and what kind of AI is being used?
So while surveillance is not something we discuss in the public domain, I can talk about
Hoping to catch you unaware, but
yeah. It's hard-coded into the DNA. So just as, the AI is supposed to have hard-coded guardrails, we are also hard-coded as human beings. So, but I can share use cases in the SupTech where AI is helping the first-line regulator, which is the exchange, react more quickly. So we were doing this, it was probably taking a little more time in a totally manual environment. So one area is there are numerous orders. There are orders from various authorities, whether it's arbitrators, whether it is the appellate SEBI, Securities Appellate Tribunal, courts. So absorbing those orders and summarizing them so that action points can be plotted quickly, that normally takes maybe 6 to 7 hours per order, because the orders are quite voluminous, complex to digest. So summarizing those orders and creating action points is one area where AI can play a role. Secondly, as you rightly alluded, we are a first-line regulator. We do various inspections. We need to give instructions through letters. So bringing standardization to those letters and creating the letter in a templated form so that they're easy to understand. There is a particular messaging that goes out which doesn't get diluted because of human variability. This is another area where AI can play a role as of now.
So the common pattern that I noticed in both your examples, both for DRHP and this, is that a lot of document analysis, right? Using AI for document analysis, voluminous documents running into hundreds and thousands of pages, doing it as fast as possible, essentially capturing the information with minimum error. Is that right?
So I think the idea is to use scarce human resources in areas where it matters. So in terms of judgment, in terms of applying thought. Whereas if the human being is blocked in actually reading the document and summarizing it, then there's not too much time left for judgment and applying thought. So I think it's freeing up more time. Where AI can actually help is freeing up more time for value addition. And sometimes, taking off from where you said, let's make this a bit of fun. So I think there's a lot written, volumes written, digressing a bit, volumes written on what happens to the freshers when they join the workforce. Because a lot of work done by freshers is being done by AI. But I think there's an opportunity for them too, in terms of having to avoid the drudge work. For example, I remember over decades ago, I'll not tell you how many decades ago, otherwise you'll guess my age. But decades ago, I was an article assistant.
You have an AI to guess that.
It might hallucinate, might make me younger. So we used to do this journal vouching, and it was a mindless task. But today, if the same article assistant had some AI bots to assist him, he could do a lot more, and it could be a lot more enriching for him. I think that's a pivot the youngsters need to turn to understand how to leverage AI, to not do a better job, but applying more thought, and they can develop professionally much faster that way.
Two very interesting points. One is AI-assisted human expertise, how to amplify scarce human experts with more AI. But I think the point you opened up in the last minute is quite kind of worthy of another panel. You know, what happens when companies go from being pyramids to diamonds, where fresher requirements keep coming down. So I always say that that's a very interesting and kind of potentially complicated topic to get into, so we won't get into that here.
But most of the freshers will become entrepreneurs.
Yes, and the other thing I keep saying is that as a fresher, you won't lose your job to AI, you lose your job to another fresher who's using AI. So you better be that person who's using AI, right?
Precisely my point.
Yes, thank you. Great, I'm going to just reverse the question to you now, back to you, Deepak. I think, now we had talked about SupTech, let's talk about RegTech for a minute, right? I don't know in the world of AMCs what the compliance burden is, but I assume it's not low, right? No. Yeah. So therefore, again, same story. You're competing with players which are 2 extra zeros to the right, as you yourself mentioned. So how do you kind of use RegTech technology or maybe AI-powered mechanisms to comply better, so that you're not going to be held to a lower standard of compliance compared to the big guys, but therefore your expenses can't be amortized over such large scale either. So what are you doing to solve that problem?
Oh, that's a great question, Santanu. We have 500 different layers of disclosures, reports, authorities to, sometimes you'll report to SEBI, there's an AMFI reporting, there's your own trustees, there's a bunch of things. We used AI a lot to just figure out, make sense of this whole thing, go through everything, tell me what I need to do when. So now there's a weekly calendar, there's a daily calendar, there's a monthly calendar, all of this designed by AI, assigned automatically to the right people. So we do this on risk as well, so risk analysis at various points. We've used it to write code to make some of this easier for us. So for instance, there's a bunch of things that you have to do. It says the fund manager should be tracked if certain things like this happen. If a trade happens that is outside these range of parameters, we're like, okay, that sounds like something that code can solve, right? So you can actually write code that says, go in there, figure out if this thing has happened, throw us an alarm, and if that happens on a regular basis. Now, some of this code is running on our servers and solving a regulatory problem rather than the traditional problem of someone as a human being having to run all these tests individually. You have a program that's been written to do this, saves us a lot of regulatory costs. And it's fun also because we get to turn this around in a much faster time. It's like sometimes it's done overnight. My marketing guy tells me, I need this report to look like this, and the tech team is not giving me any time. Chal AI se karte hain. So, and we don't want to give AI the data. So you tell AI to write the code to analyze the data, help it install it on your local machine, run it with your private data, get out the report and say, wow, in the end it's, it's fun as well.
I'm going to compliment you for being an AMC founder who actually writes and looks at code. So give him a round of applause. I'll give Akshay the last word. There's short of a minute left. So you heard SupTech, you heard RegTech versions. If you look at your investment managers, they have to walk the fine line between, we have to grow the business, but we can't trip regulatory wires, right? What is your view of RegTech and AI so that growth is not impeded, but compliance is maximal?
I think that's a wonderful question. See, we are in the business of trust, and we want to make sure that we uphold the interest of the investors at all points in time. Now, very recently, there have been certain cases of front-running in the industry, and that begs us to think, is there a way we can take a relook at the controls which are implemented within our investment management functions. Now, from the RegTech perspective, the intent is that we should be able to detect, and then we should be able to prevent. Now, all the dealer conversations are recorded. We want to make sure that today, when we assess those recordings, which are done by humans, by the way, because there are nuances of the language. There are nuances of the vocabulary being followed between the dealer and the broker. We want to identify those quote-unquote dark patterns. And we want to stop the trade from happening if there is a reason to believe there could be front-running happening. How can we move away from assessing based on sample to assessing 100% of all the interactions that the dealers are doing? That is an area that we are experimenting on right now. From the second line of defense and the third line of defense, which is risk and the audit perspective, this is a very beautiful opportunity that how can we move away from scientifically discoverable samples to 100% coverage. I think that's a utopian vision that I have, and there are humble endeavors which are ensuing.
I'm very excited about next year's panel based on what you just said. In fact, fabulous. I think time is up, but I wanted to also, sort of on a lighter note, say that Ian and I were discussing earlier that can we get through the session without mentioning dark patterns? I think we've failed. So thank you so much. You've been a lovely audience and you've been a lovely panel. So thanks to all of you and thanks to the organizers for having us. Thank you.